Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. Alright, let's shift into the dark. I've been driving long enough to know when a road wants you there and when it doesn't. Highway 101 around Forks, Washington. That stretch has never wanted anybody. Name's Ray. I run nights mostly, reefer loads, produce and frozen stuff, Seattle down to the Oregon line and back. I'm used to fog, bad weather, elk stepping out like they own the lane. You learn to deal with weird. You don't spook easy or you don't last. But there's one run I don't take anymore. And it all comes back to a woman in the fir trees at 3 in the morning. That night I was hauling light, half a trailer of frozen food headed south. It was late fall. That wet season when the air never quite dries and everything smells like moss and rot. I'd fueled up outside Port Angeles, grabbed a burnt coffee that tasted like old pennies, and settled in for the dark stretch past Forks. Inside the cab it was that familiar mix. Diesel hum under my feet, the faint rattle in the dash I kept meaning to fix, the heater breathing lukewarm air that never quite reached my hands. My windshield was a tunnel of black, carved out by 2 tired beams of halogen. Everything beyond that, just moving shadows and trees. Out there, the firs grow tall and close. At night, they lean over the road like they're listening. Even with the windows up, you get the feeling of wet bark, dripping branches, the kind of darkness that doesn't care you're passing through. Fog started rolling in around 2:30 a.m. At first, it was just low patches across the asphalt, ghosting past my headlights. Then it thickened. 1 second I could see 100 yards ahead. The next my world shrank to maybe 30, then 20. The beams hit white and bounced back. Road signs showed up last second like jump scares. My eyes locked on the center line, following that faded yellow like it was a lifeline. The CB was quiet. Too quiet. Not even the usual late-night idiots joking around. Just a faint hiss of static whenever I punched the squelch. My phone had no signal, normal out there, but it added to that feeling of being cut off. I dropped speed. You don't mess around in that kind of fog. Not with curves, cliffs, and deer that like to wait until the last second to play tag with your bumper. The wipers beat a slow, rubbery metronome against the glass. Outside, the world was just white and black and wet. I remember thinking, this stretch again. Should have taken the inland route. About 10 minutes into the worst of it, I saw her. I came around a mild bend, and my headlights cut across the shoulder. For a second the fog broke, and there she was, standing just beyond the white line at the tree line's edge. Woman, medium height, long, dark hair plastered to her face and shoulders like she'd just climbed out of a lake. Dress clinging to her. Could have been white once. Now it looked gray, soaked through. Bare feet on the gravel shoulder. She wasn't hitchhiking. No thumb out. No waving. She just stood there, close enough that if I drifted a foot right, I'd clip her. Her arm was raised, but not toward me. She was pointing into the trees. I didn't slam the brakes. Instinct says you don't in that fog. Instead, my foot eased up on the accelerator and I rode the brake gently, eyes flicking between her and the road. My brain scrambled for something ordinary to label her with. Drunk, lost hiker, domestic dispute gone wrong. Anything human. I passed her slow. As the cab drew level, I got a better look. Her head turned, following me, but her arms stayed locked on the trees. Her face was wrong. Not monstrous, just blank. No panic, no pleading, no anger. Expression like someone watching the rain hit a window. Detached. Distant. Her eyes looked too dark, even in my lights. Then she slid out of view past my driver window, swallowed by the fog. I checked my mirrors automatically. Nothing. No figure. No outline. just gray and the smear of my own trailer lights. I told myself the fog ate her up. Simple as that. I've watched whole cars vanish in that stuff. Still, my fingers tightened on the wheel until the leather creaked. My heartbeat picked up in my ears, louder than the engine. I focused back on the road. Center line. Shoulder. Center line. Maybe 3-4 seconds passed. And then the cab felt wrong. You drive long enough, you get the sixth sense about your space. When you're alone, when a seatbelt's twisted, when a door isn't fully latched. The air in the cab had weight now, like someone had opened the passenger door and climbed in without saying a word. The hairs on my arms and neck stood up. I could feel cold along my right side, bleeding through the heater's weak breath. The smell changed too. Less diesel and stale coffee, more river water. Wet earth. Something cold and organic, like a pile of soaked leaves left in a ditch. I didn't want to look. That's the truth. People talk big about what they do, but sitting there, rolling through fog at 40 miles an hour, every nerve in my body begged me not to turn my head. Just keep driving. Pretend the cab was empty. Pretend the road was normal. But you can't stare forward forever. And humans are stupidly curious animals. I shifted my gaze, inch by inch, off the road and toward the passenger seat. Empty. Just a crumpled fast food bag, an old logbook, my jacket thrown over the backrest. No woman. No wet footprints. No one. I exhaled slowly, didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. My hand shook a little on the wheel. I told myself I was tired, that truckers see weird things in the dark all the time. It's practically part of the job. I brought my eyes back to the windshield. The fog seemed thicker, swirling like smoke. That's when I noticed the floor mat. At first it was just a darker patch in the corner of my vision. My brain didn't want to register it. Then the pattern broke through. Smudged ovals, spaced like steps. Darker than the rubber, slightly glossy under the dash lights. Wet footprints. There. Small. Starting near the passenger door and stopping right at the edge of the seat. My chest tightened. My hands went cold on the wheel even as the heater hummed. This wasn't maybe I saw something weird outside anymore. This was inside my space. Inside my truck. I didn't say anything. Didn't curse, didn't shout. Just drove. The way you drive past an accident without looking too hard. The way you walk by something dead on the road and pretend you didn't notice. I didn't pick you up, I remember thinking. I didn't stop. The CB crackled suddenly, making me jump. Just a burst of static, then silence. No voice, no call sign. That's pretty normal out there. But in that moment it felt like someone clearing their throat and deciding not to speak. The road curved again, slowly, following the coastline. I could feel the ocean out there in the dark, somewhere beyond the trees and cliffs. That heavy, cold presence you don't see but never quite forget. I tried to rationalize the footprints. Maybe I'd stepped in something earlier. Maybe the mat was just worn that way and my nerves were rewriting what I saw. But the prints were fresh. I could see where the water had pooled in the grooves. One looked newer than the others, as if it had just been placed. I focused on the road, on the dash, on anything that wasn't that floor mat. My mouth tasted like metal from the bad coffee. My tongue felt thick. I realized I was breathing shallow, like the air had gone thin. My right ear popped like a pressure change in the cab. The temperature dropped another notch. Without meaning to, I glanced at the passenger window. Something was wrong with the glass. Condensation at first glance. Thin fogged patches trailing down. But when the road signs flashed their pale light across it, I saw lines. Not random streaks. Finger trails. Dozens of them. Starting high, dragging down. Some long, some short, like someone had been running their hands slowly down the glass from the outside. From the top edge. Except we were moving at 40 miles an hour through a forest. My throat went dry. I didn't stop. Didn't pull over. Every instinct screamed, "Do not stop this truck." The branches outside seemed closer now, for silhouettes leaning in, their tips brushing at the night. The fog pressed against the glass like it wanted in. I felt watched, not from one spot but from everywhere the trees grew dense. Up ahead, a green road sign emerged from the white, letters bleeding into view. Forks 8. 8 more miles. That was all. 8 miles of fog and trees and this, whatever it was sitting in the space my mind wouldn't look at. I kept my eyes glued to the lines, hands locked at 10 and 2. My mind narrowed down to simple tasks. Keep centered. Watch your speed. Don't drift. Don't look at the mat. Don't look at the window. Out of reflex, I checked my right mirror. For half a second, in that narrow rectangle of glass, I saw something impossible. Not my trailer. Not the road. Trees. Close. So close their trunks seemed pressed up against the side of my cab. Branches scraping metal. And between them, just behind my passenger door, the pale curve of a face. Hair hanging, dripping. Eyes black pits reflecting my own headlights back at me. Then the mirror snapped back. Just my trailer lights glowing dim in the fog. I almost ran off the road. The wheel jerked, tires skidding a little on the wet surface. I corrected, muscles moving faster than my brain. The trailer swung but stayed behind me, obedient by habit. The ESC light blinked angry on the dash. Somewhere underneath, the ABS coughed. The CB hissed again. Another burst of static. But under it, barely audible, I swear I heard something else. Not words. Just a long, low exhale. Like someone sighing in my ear. Then warmth. Not from the heater this time. The air itself shifted. Like whatever had settled in the cab got bored. The smell of water and wet earth faded back into diesel and dust. The pressure eased. My shoulders dropped slightly. I'd been tight as a cable without realizing it. I risked another glance at the floor mat. The footprints were still there, but drier. Edges fuzzed, shine gone. On the passenger window, the finger trails had thinned into ordinary streaks. Could have been any night's condensation. The next sign showed up. Rest area 2 miles. I took it, pulled off into a small turnout. Just a dimly lit lot with a couple of RVs sleeping and an empty sedan. I parked far from everyone else, killed the engine, and sat there listening to the ticking of hot metal cooling. The silence after a long run always feels too big. That night it felt hungry. When I finally opened the passenger door to check the mat, the cold slapped me in the face. I climbed down, reached inside with my phone light. The floor was dry. No prints. No damp patches. Just the same worn rubber I'd had for years. I checked the window. Clean, aside from a few old streaks. Nothing fresh, nothing strange. I told myself I was tired, that the fog had played tricks, that my brain had stitched together stress, stories, and shadows into something it could scare itself with. Then I closed the passenger door. On the outside of the glass, right at eye level, was a perfect, wet handprint. Small, feminine, fingers spread, droplets still sliding down. I hadn't touched that window. Nobody had. There was no mistaking the shape. I stood there in the cold, breath smoking in front of me, listening to the distant whoosh of trucks passing on 101. The trees around the rest area swayed gently, their tops lost in the fog. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the lights, the forest waited. I drove on after that, finished my delivery, came back home. On paper, it was just another run. But I don't take that stretch past Forks at night anymore. If dispatch tries to put me on it, I find a reason to swap. They don't argue. Drivers get weird about certain routes. It's part of the culture. People ask me why sometimes. I just tell them this. There's a woman in those fir trees who doesn't need a ride. She just needs you to see where she's pointing. And I'm not interested in finding out what finally steps out of that forest when someone listens. I've been running the I-84 corridor through the Columbia River Gorge for almost 20 years. Long enough to respect that place the way you respect deep water or wild animals. Even on a good night, the wind can shove a full-loaded rig like it's made of cardboard. The cliffs rise straight up from the highway, black rock walls that swallow the moon. The river below. You don't see it, you just hear it, this constant low roar like the earth breathing. But there was one night when something else breathed back. I was hauling a flatbed, empty after a delivery in Portland, heading east toward Cascade Locks. It was past 1 a.m., the hour when the gorge gets cold enough to numb your fingers even inside the cab. The wind was slicing through in these hard, angry gusts, whistling around the mirrors. When it hits right, you can feel it through the wheel, this shudder like the highway itself is flexing. The CB was quiet. Too quiet. No trucker banter. No weather updates. Just the faint hiss of static every few minutes. I tried scanning channels, but nothing stuck for long. The noise kept cutting out in these short, sharp bursts. Outside, my headlights carved thin tunnels through the dark. The signs flickered past. Exit 40, Bonneville Dam. Every one of them shaking from the wind. The cliffs loomed on my left, swallowing the sky, jagged silhouettes against clouds moving way too fast. On my right, the drop-off into the river was just a void. Everything smelled like wet stone and cold diesel. I remember thinking, one more hour, and I can shut down in Hood River. That's when I heard it. Something underneath the wind. At first, I thought it was a blown tire on a car somewhere up ahead. This long, strained wail carrying through the gorge. But the wind breaks sound apart. Throws it sideways, behind you, in front of you. You can't trust direction in that place. The scream came again. Longer, deeper, almost human. But not shaped like a human voice. Every instinct I had said, you imagine that. Drivers hallucinate sounds all the time at night, trailer squeals, phantom brake releases, CB echoes. I kept my eyes forward, hands firm on the wheel. Then the CB crackled alive with a violent burst of static. Not a voice at first, just white noise like someone breathing right against the mic. Then a whisper broke through. Don't stop. Not a warning tone, not a shout, just cold, flat like someone stating a fact. Before I could answer, the channel went dead again. I told myself it was a bleed-through from some distant frequency. Happens sometimes when the wind is bad. Happens more in the gorge. But the scream came again. Louder this time, cutting across the river like something was calling out of a cavern. I slowed down. Not a full stop, just dropped to 40, then 35. My trailer rattled in the crosswind. Something in the air felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. My ears popped. That was when I saw movement. About 100 yards ahead, right in the middle of the lane, something was on the road. Low, crawling. At first I thought it was a deer or maybe someone who'd crashed. A drunk, a stranded driver, anything normal. But when my high beams hit him, he wasn't crawling. He was dragging himself toward me, pulling his whole weight with his hands. No use of his legs. Arms stretched out way too long, elbows bending at angles that didn't make sense. He lifted his head. Not fast. Just this slow, deliberate tilt, like he was listening to the engine. His face was pale, washed out like driftwood. Eyes black, not from shadow, just empty. Every instinct in my body froze. My left hand tightened on the wheel hard enough that my knuckles cracked. He opened his mouth. The scream that came out was the same one I'd heard in the wind. I didn't wait. I didn't wonder. I just reacted. My boot slammed the accelerator so hard the cab lurched. The flatbed groaned behind me as I pushed into the wind, engine roaring higher than I usually let it. As I passed him, something hit the side of the trailer. One sharp impact, like a hand slapping metal. Hard. Hard enough I felt it through the frame. I didn't look back. But for the next mile, the scream followed me. It wasn't on the road anymore. It was everywhere. In the wind, under the tires, echoing off the cliffs. A gathering sound, building and fading, rising again like it was moving alongside me out of sight. My mirrors were black. Not dim black, like the night behind me had thickened into something solid. Even with my headlights reflecting off the guardrails ahead, nothing reflected in those mirrors. No road, no trailer lights, just two empty rectangles swallowing light. I drove blind to everything behind me for almost 5 miles. When the mirrors finally cleared, it was instant, like a switch flipping. Road behind me, trailer steady, everything normal again. But I kept speeding until Hood River, hands shaking on the wheel. In the morning, I checked the trailer. On the passenger side rail, about halfway down the length, there was a handprint. Long, wide. Too many inches between the fingers. Pressed into the dust so deep I had to scrub to get it out. I never reported it. Didn't file anything. Didn't tell the yard. What was I supposed to say? That something crawled onto the highway in the middle of the gorge and tried to pull itself into my cab? I just changed routes, stopped taking night runs through that stretch. But sometimes, late at night on a different run, when the wind gets loud and the CB crackles for no reason, I swear I still hear that scream under the howl. I've been driving long enough to know that the Snoqualmie Pass plays by its own rules. Snow hits harder up there. Fog moves like it's alive. Even the quiet feels heavier. Name's Aaron. 22 years running long haul, mostly construction supplies. That night I had a full load of lumber chained down tight, headed east toward Ellensburg. It was early winter, first real freeze of the year, and the roads were slick with that thin layer of ice you don't see until you're already sliding on it. The air smelled like cold metal and pine sap. Inside the cab it was warm but stale, the heater cycling dry air against the windshield. I'd been riding in and out of patchy fog for an hour, the kind that dulls your headlights and makes road signs look like ghosts holding their breath. Around midnight, my GPS chirped and rerouted. Roadwork ahead. Mandatory detour. I didn't question it. I'd taken weird detours before, backlogging roads, maintenance tracks, even one-way service lanes when WashDOT had half the mountain torn up. I figured they were doing avalanche prep or repairing a cracked shoulder. The detour sign showed up a mile later. Orange. Reflective. Fresh. Left lane, maintenance route. I swung over, following a narrow cutoff that dipped down, then curled along the mountainside. The trees pressed in tight, branches scraping my trailer in dull whispers. Headlights faded fast in that cold air, swallowed by the dark. Then I saw the tunnel. At first I thought it was a washout bypass, short, rough concrete, low-clearance arch. But the closer I got, the stranger it looked. No lighting. No reflector tape, no signage, just a dark hole carved into the mountain, dripping meltwater down its sides. The entrance felt too tight for a rig, too old, too forgotten, but the detour arrows pointed straight in. I checked my mirrors. Nobody behind me, nobody ahead. The wind outside had stopped completely. That's what should have warned me first. Tunnels usually amplify outside noise, wind, engines, but this one swallowed everything. Still, a route's a route. Dispatch doesn't like excuses. I eased forward, downshifting to give myself more control. The tires rolled over wet concrete, slick with old runoff. The sound changed immediately, engine hum bouncing back at me in short, blunt echoes. The tunnel walls were close. Too close. Maybe 3 feet clearance on each side of the trailer. Water dripped in slow, rhythmic taps. The concrete was stained dark, almost black near the bottom where decades of runoff had pooled. 50 feet in, my headlights hit the far wall and died. The tunnel curved right sharply, swallowing my beams before they reached anything solid. Halfway through the curve, the engine coughed. Just once. A short, sharp sputter that jolted the whole cab. I tapped the accelerator. The hum smoothed out. Everything felt fine. Maybe condensation hit the intake, happens in cold tunnels. Then the engine died completely. Silence. Real silence. No hum. No fan. No heater. Just dripping water and the faint tick of hot metal cooling. The tunnel swallowed even the sound of my own breathing. I tried the ignition. Dead. No grind, no click. Just nothing. I sat there with both hands on the wheel, feeling the cab settle into stillness. The air turned colder by the second, like the warmth was leaking out through holes I couldn't see. My breath fogged the glass. The smell shifted too. Less diesel, more damp, like old basements and moss. Then I heard it. A long, low inhale. From the walls. It wasn't airflow. Not wind. Not mechanical. It was slow enough, deep enough that my body recognized it before my brain did. Like something big was drawing in breath. Then a long, steady exhale. My pulse slammed against my ribs. The concrete around me glistened in my headlights. But it wasn't just dripping anymore. It was pulsing. Just slightly. Enough that the shadows shifted in slow waves, rising and falling with each inhale and exhale. The tunnel was breathing. I forced myself to reach for the key again. My fingers shook so hard I fumbled it twice. The metal felt colder than it should have. like it had been left in snow. The engine stayed dead. Something moved behind me. Not a sound, more like a pressure shift. The same way you can tell when someone steps into a room behind your back. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just darkness thick enough to look solid. Then the breathing changed. Faster. Closer. Like whatever was doing it had moved, repositioning itself. The windshield fogged heavily, my own breath mixing with the cold air pressing in. Without the engine and heater, the cab felt tiny, sealed in, suffocating. I wiped a circle clear with my sleeve. Fresh handprints covered the inside of the glass. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Small ones. Large ones. Smears. Fingers dragged downward, leaving long streaks. Palms pressed flat, then lifted. Some overlapping like they had been placed gently, one after another. My stomach clenched. I hadn't touched the windshield. Nobody had. And the prints weren't old. Each one was wet, fogged on the edges like freshly pressed skin. A deep, slow inhale filled the tunnel again, longer than before, and the walls seemed to lean inward. I slammed the key again. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th turn, the engine coughed back to life so violently it shook the mirrors. Headlights flared brighter. The breathing stopped instantly, cut off mid-exhale. I dropped into first and floored it. The trailer scraped the right wall, sparks spitting behind me. The sound echoed like tearing metal inside a cavern. The tunnel curved tight, and for a second I thought the rig would jackknife. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, knuckles burning white. The breathing returned, this time right behind the cab. Louder, faster, like something was chasing the trailer, pulling air through a throat too wide to be human. The exit appeared ahead in a sudden burst of cold night air. I shot out of the tunnel at nearly 50, the rig fishtailing on the icy pavement before snapping straight. The engine roared. Wind smashed back into the cab. The world felt normal again. I didn't stop until I reached the next lit truck turnout, miles down the pass. I stepped out, legs shaking so badly I nearly fell. The tunnel wasn't on the map. Not listed in construction notes. The detour never existed. When I returned the next day with a DOT officer, the road was gone. Just forest, rock, and an old, collapsed service shed. But the handprints stayed on my windshield. For weeks, even after I cleaned the glass. And on cold nights, when condensation forms just right, I still see new ones appear. Right where I sit, right where I breathe. I stopped hauling through Snoqualmie after that. Some tunnels lead somewhere. Some tunnels lead nowhere. And some are alive. They call it Dead Man's Curve for a reason. Thing is, nobody tells you what happens after the dead man goes over. Name's Luke. I've been hauling up and down the Oregon coast for most of my career. Lumber, seafood, paper, whatever fits on a flatbed or in a box. If you run 101 long enough, you get used to the cliffs. You get used to the sound of the ocean below you in the dark, where you can't see it but you know it's waiting. Dead Man's Curve is just south of Coos Bay. Sharp left-hand bend carved into the side of a cliff. Nothing between your truck and the drop but a guardrail that looks older than you. There are warning signs a mile back. Speed 25, sharp curve ahead, and someone always hits the brakes too late. I've always respected that corner. Drop a gear. Ease in. No sudden moves. This night started like any other. I'd picked up a load of boxed seafood, frozen solid, out of Charleston. Night run north. It was late, somewhere around 2:30 a.m., the hour when the world feels half abandoned. Light drizzle, low clouds, the kind of damp that gets into your bones even with the heater on. Inside the cab it smelled like stale coffee, salt, and the faint ammonia of the reefer unit cycling behind me. The dash lights glowed a soft amber. My gauge is steady. Headlights stretched out over wet blacktop, catching the reflective posts along the edge of the road like little white eyes. The CB was mostly dead. Every few minutes I'd get a burst of static or a faint voice too far away to make out. I flipped through a couple channels, listened long enough to hear nothing useful, and left it on 19 out of habit. The road between Charleston and Coos Bay winds up and around the hillside. On your left, rock and trees. On your right, nothing. Just air and the Pacific breathing down below. I knew I was getting close to the curve when the first warning sign appeared. Yellow diamond, black arrow bent hard left. I eased off the throttle, felt the trailer's weight push forward, and tapped the brake until the speedometer dropped. That's when I saw the taillights. Way up ahead at first. 2 red dots floating at the edge of visibility, swaying slightly as they rounded the bend before me. Looked like another rig, maybe a few truck lengths in front, moving a little too fast for comfort on that stretch. I didn't think much of it. Plenty of drivers run that corner heavier and faster than they should. As I closed the distance, I could see the lights bobbing, dancing a little too loosely. The trailer ahead of me seemed to fishtail just a hair each time the road curved. "Easy, buddy," I muttered under my breath. Old habit. Like the other driver could hear me through glass and distance and dark. The rain picked up a notch. My wipers squeaked across the glass, clearing arcs in the water that filled back in almost immediately. The white lines blurred and stretched under my headlights. The taillights ahead flickered once, then steadied, then swayed hard left. I grabbed the CB mic, northbound, just before Deadman's Curve. "Driver up ahead. You all right?" Nothing. Just a sharp crackle of static, like someone exhaling across the speaker. The rig ahead of me drifted toward the center, corrected too late, then jerked back right. The taillights swung wide, edging too close to where I knew the guardrail must be. My heart kicked a little faster. There's nowhere to stop safe there. No shoulder, no pullout, just rock and drop. "Driver in front of me, you're running hot into the curve. Back it down," I said into the mic. "You're gonna lose it." Silence. The CB hissed, then went dead flat. Not even background noise, like the channel had been cut off. My own tires hummed louder as the road began to tilt into the bend. I dropped another gear, feeling the engine brake grab and hold. The trailer tugged behind me, the weight pushing outward. I kept the wheel steady, eyes on the curve ahead, and those swaying red lights. They reached the apex of the bend first. For a split second, they hung there perfectly level. Then they slid sideways. Not a skid. Not a gradual loss of traction. Just sideways. Like the whole truck had been nudged off the edge by an invisible hand. The taillights tipped, rolled, dropped out of sight over the cliff. No sound. No crunch of guardrail giving way. No distant explosion of impact. No shattered glass carried on the wind. Just the hiss of my tires and the drum of rain on my roof. Every hair on my arms stood up. I eased through the curve slower than I ever had in my life, eyes flicking from the road to the empty guardrail. It stood there intact, old and rusted and steady. No scrape marks. No fresh damage. No sign anything had gone over. My chest felt tight. I forced myself to breathe. As I came out of the bend, I checked my mirror, expecting maybe, I don't even know what, that I'd misjudged distance, that the truck was still there behind me somehow. The road behind was empty. No headlights, no running lights, nothing but darkness and the faint glow of my own trailer reflected back. I kept rolling another mile before I could make myself reach for the CB again. "Any units near Coos Bay? Come back," I said. My voice sounded thinner than usual. Just saw a rig go over Deadman's Curve. No visuals on rec. "Anybody copy?" Static. Then a male voice, calm and clipped. "Maybe DOT or local." "Say again, driver?" I swallowed. Northbound 101. Just cleared Deadman's Curve. White box truck, no markings, went over the edge. Saw taillights go. No impact yet. Might be down on the rocks. There was a pause. Paper noises in the background. Someone flipping through something. "Northbound. Can you confirm damage to the rail?" I looked in the mirror again, even though it was long gone behind me now. Negative. Rail looked fine. But I definitely saw. "Copy." The voice cut in. "Go ahead and pull into the next truck stop or way station. We'll have an officer meet you." 10-4. I pulled into a small truck stop outside Coos Bay not long after. The lot was half empty. Sodium lights threw harsh orange pools across wet asphalt. My engine ticked down into silence when I shut it off, the sudden absence of vibration making the cab feel wrong. Too still. The officer showed up maybe 15 minutes later. Tall guy, heavy jacket, brim dripping rain. He had that look of somebody who's worked nights too long. Eyes tired but sharp. He climbed up on the step and leaned into my open door. "You're the one who called in the crash," he said. "Yeah," I answered. I could feel the adrenaline wearing off, leaving my hands a little shaky on the steering wheel. Southbound side of Dead Man's Curve. Box truck ahead of me lost it. Went right over. Didn't hear an impact, but I mean, where else could it have gone? He studied my face for a long second, like he was measuring something that had nothing to do with the words. "You been drinking tonight, sir?" No, I couldn't help the edge in my voice. "Been on clock since 8. You can pull my log, check my ELD, whatever you want." "I know what I saw." He nodded slowly. "Mind stepping down a sec?" We stood under the eaves while the rain pattered off the roof and cars hissed by on the highway. The diesel pumps clicked in the background. Somewhere a reefer unit coughed and rattled. Cycling on. He crossed his arms. We had a unit check the curve. Rails intact. No debris. No skid marks. Nothing on the rocks below. Coast Guard's got no contacts on the water. "You're sure it wasn't fog?" "Brake lights around the bend." "Maybe?" I shook my head. "No fog thick enough to hallucinate a whole truck." I saw taillights go over. Tilt, roll, disappear. I felt it in my gut. He watched me for another long moment, then sighed. The kind of sigh that sounded like he'd done this dance before. "You're not the first one to call it in," he said quietly. That shut me up. "Every few years," he went on, "we get a trucker come through just like you. Middle of the night. Light rain. Says they saw a rig go over Dead Man's Curve. White box. No logos. No plate they can give. We roll units, call Coast Guard, check every inch." He glanced toward the dark shape of the highway. "Never found a thing." "Could be some guy running without lights," I said, reaching for something rational. "Some side road I don't know about. Maybe I caught a reflection off." He cut me off with a small shake of the head. "There's nowhere for a truck to go there except through that rail and straight down." A semi rolled past the station just then. Lights reflected in his eyes for a second. We both watched it go. "You know how the curve got its name?" he asked. "I figured accidents," I said. "One big one," he replied. "About 40 years back. Driver fell asleep or his brakes went. No one knows for sure. Witness behind him saw the taillights go over. They found the truck on the rocks next morning. Took him all day to cut him out." The officer's jaw tightened. Not like he was afraid. More like the memory sat wrong with him, even secondhand. "Since then," he continued, "we've had at least 6 calls just like yours. Always same story. Taillights weaving. Truck goes over. No crash. No wreck. No skid. Nothing on the cameras either. Like it only exists for the guy behind it." The rain picked up again, tapping harder on the metal awning. The truck stop lights hummed. Somewhere behind us, a compressor kicked on with a deep, mechanical sigh. "Maybe it's something in the road," I said, even though I didn't believe it. Light bouncing off the rock. Reflection off the guardrail. Some optical thing. "Maybe," he said, but his tone told me he'd already tried to believe that and failed. He looked back at me. "You ran that bend how many times?" "Dozens," I said. "Never seen anything like tonight." "You see taillights, you followed them in," he said quietly. "You backed off, though. You slowed down." "Because he was driving like an idiot," I muttered. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe that's the point." We stood there a minute more, listening to the hiss of tires on wet highway, the distant boom of surf hitting rock. The officer finally stuck his hands deeper into his pockets. "Get some rest, driver," he said. "Log it if you need to, but don't beat yourself up trying to figure it out. If you run this route again and you see those lights," he met my eyes, "don't try to catch up. Don't try to be a witness. Just let him go." He walked back to his cruiser, leaving wet boot prints that filled in with rain almost immediately. I climbed back into my cab and shut the door. Inside, the cab felt smaller than it ever had. The heater fought the damp but never quite won. My steering wheel still carried the warmth of my grip, but my fingers felt cold. I sat there a long time before starting the engine. When I finally pulled back onto 101 and headed north, every red light in the distance made my chest tighten. Brake lights, reflectors, even radio tower lamps on the hills. I still run the coast sometimes. Work is work. But when I come up on Dead Man's Curve at night now, I do something I never used to do. I look for taillights ahead of me, and if I see any swaying, any bobbing red dots that don't look right, I don't speed up. I don't grab the CB. I drop another gear, let a gap open up, and give whatever's in front of me all the space in the world to disappear. Because up there, on that cliff over the Pacific, not every truck you follow is really on the road. Some of them already went over a long time ago, and they're just waiting for someone to watch it happen again. People talk big about what scares them on the road: whiteouts in Wyoming, black ice in the Rockies, brake fade going down Donner. I've had my share of close calls in all those places. But the only stretch of pavement that still makes my hands sweat when I think about it is 4 miles of steel over dark water. The Astoria-Megler Bridge. Name's Dan. I pull nights up and down the west coast, Portland to Tacoma, sometimes out toward Spokane, sometimes as far south as Redding. I like the quiet hours, fewer four-wheelers acting stupid, just you, the truck, and whatever the dark decides to throw at you. That night, I was running empty out of Astoria after a late drop. Reefer trailer, door seals still smelling faintly like fish and ice. It was close to 2 in the morning, sky low and heavy, the kind of cloudy night where the moon is just a pale bruise behind the overcast. Astoria at that hour feels half submerged. Wet streets reflecting yellow sodium lights, harbor cranes frozen in place like skeletons. The air smelled like salt, diesel, and old wood, piers and pilings soaked through with decades of tide. I'd fueled up at a little truck stop outside town, grabbed a coffee that had been burnt about 3 hours too long, and pointed the nose of my Freightliner toward the bridge. Even before you get on it, you can feel it. The road narrows. The signs change. There's something about seeing bridge maybe ICY and crosswinds stacked together over deep water that tightens your chest, even if you've crossed it 100 times. I eased onto the span, tires thumping over the first expansion joint. The bridge rose ahead of me in a long, gentle arc, the green steel frame disappearing into the mist. To my right, the black spread of the Columbia River. To my left, nothing but rail and dark. My headlights carved out 2 pale lanes on the wet asphalt. The raindrops looked silver in the beams before the wind threw them sideways. Inside the cab, the heater hummed, pushing lukewarm air at the windshield. The dash lights glowed soft orange, gauges steady. The CB was little more than a faint hiss. No chatter at this hour, not out here. My tires gave off that hollow, humming vibration you only get on steel and concrete high above open space. Crossing the Astoria, Megler at night feels less like driving over a river and more like driving into it. The sides fall away. The far end disappears. You're just suspended. I just settled into that middle of the bridge zone where land is equally far in both directions when I noticed the figure. At first it was just a darker shape inside the darkness, off to my right where the pedestrian walkway runs along the span. I thought maybe it was a light pole or one of the emergency phones. But as I came closer, the shape resolved into something too thin, too tall, and too wrong to be metal. Person. Standing on the walkway. In the rain. 2 in the morning. Tall. Still. Soaked. As my headlights pushed into the mist, I saw more detail. Long coat or dress, hanging heavy and waterlogged. The fabric clung to the shape underneath, plastered to legs, to arms. Head tilted, not toward the water, not toward the town, toward me. Not looking at me, listening. That's what it looked like they were trying to hear my engine. Any sensible driver would have stared straight ahead, given it a lane's worth of attention and nothing more. But night shifts and long roads make you curious in ways you shouldn't be. You start needing explanations for every strange thing, just to feel like the world still makes sense. So I did what I now know I shouldn't have done. I slowed down. Not a panic brake, just eased off the throttle, let the rig bleed speed. The hum under the cab dropped half an octave. My headlights washed over the walkway, over the wet rail, over the figure. The closer I got, the clearer they became. Too tall by a couple inches, shoulders wrong. Either hunched from the cold or something else. Dark hair hanging straight down, soaked through, plastered to the sides of the face and neck. Clothes dripping steady onto the concrete, making small, invisible splashes swallowed by the sound of the river and wind. Their head tilted a little more as I approached, like a dog that hears its name. I couldn't see their eyes, just the dark sockets where they should have been, shadowed by the angle and the wet hair. But I felt their attention fix on me as sure as if they'd waved. I passed them slow, maybe 25 over the span. For a second, they vanished from my direct line of sight, lost under the corner of my windshield frame. Then they reappeared in my passenger side window. Closer. Same tilt of the head. Same listening posture. No movement in the arms. No wave. No flinch at the lights. When my cab was just about even with them, they moved. Not to step back. Not to step forward. They climbed. One smooth motion. Hands on the rail. Foot up. Swinging with unnatural ease for someone weighed down with soaked clothes. Then the other foot. Now standing on the rail. Back to the water. Face tilted toward my window. There was no stumble. No moment of hesitation. It was practiced, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Something in my chest snapped. I hit the brakes. The ABS growled. The trailer tugged. Everything in the cab lurched forward. Logbook, coffee cup, my own weight against the seatbelt. The wipers beat madly at the glass. I didn't even wait for a full stop. As soon as my speed dropped enough that I thought I wouldn't get blown over by the wind, I yanked the parking brake, grabbed the door handle, and shoved it open. Cold hit me like a wall, wet and heavy, full of salt and river smell. The sound of the wind, muted inside the cab, roared into my ears, mixed with the deep, constant rush of water far below. I stumbled down onto the slick walkway, boots slapping the concrete. The bridge vibrated under me, that subtle, continuous hum of steel under load. "Hey!" I shouted, throat raw from coffee and exhaust. "Hey! Don't!" There was no one on the rail, no one on the walkway ahead of me, no one behind, just mist and the glow of my trailer lights painting the wet rail red. I ran to the edge, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My hands slapped the cold metal as I leaned over, looking down into the void. Nothing. No splash. No spreading rings of disturbed water. No bobbing figure in the dark. Only black river, miles wide, absorbing light and sound alike. The wind shoved at me, tugging at my jacket, trying to remind me that I was the only idiot standing outside a perfectly functioning cab in the middle of a high bridge in the middle of the night. Behind me, my truck idled, engine clicking softly in its own mechanical heartbeat. The amber side markers flickered in the mist, hazy moons along the trailer's length. I stayed there longer than I should have, scanning the water, listening for anything. Shouts, splashes, horns. But the bridge had gone quiet. Too quiet. The wind seemed to dull, the river's roar dropping back into a low murmur, like the whole world was holding its breath. Eventually, the rational part of my brain crawled back from wherever it had run to. If someone had jumped, there should have been something. A sound. A wave. Debris. The physics of it nagged at me. A body from that height doesn't just vanish without at least a trace. I stepped back from the rail, fingers numb, clothes plastered to my arms where the rain had soaked through in seconds. That's when I saw the handprint. It was on the outside of my driver door, about chest height, perfectly formed. 5 long fingers splayed out, palm pressed flat, water streaming down from it in thin rivulets. At first I thought it was mine. Maybe I'd grabbed the door without thinking in my rush to jump out. But the angles were wrong. The fingers too slender. The spread too wide. The print faced the wrong way. Not like someone inside pushing out. Like someone outside had reached up from below and pressed their hand onto the door from the side. The water dripping down from it was colder than the rain. It ran in little streams over my company logo, over the chipped paint, trailing off onto the step. I stood there staring at it while my breath smoked the air and my heart tried to punch its way out of my chest. Behind me, a car horn blipped. Quick. Irritated. I hadn't noticed the pair of headlights creeping up behind my trailer in the single lane. To them, I was just another trucker doing something stupid on a narrow bridge. I wiped my palm across the door out of instinct, smearing the print. The water that came away on my glove felt almost oily, slicker than rainwater, colder. My skin prickled under the leather. I climbed back into the cab, shut the door, and pulled slowly forward, letting the car pass when the lane widened again. The rest of the drive over the bridge, I kept my eyes locked straight ahead. Didn't look at the walkway, didn't look at the rails, didn't look at the mirrors for fear of what might be pacing me in that thin strip of concrete above the water. I didn't tell dispatch, didn't call it in. What was I going to say? I saw a wet, listening ghost climb the railing and vanish into silence. No paperwork for that. Weeks later, at a diner off 30, another driver mentioned the bridge in passing. We were trading stories over bad bacon and eggs, and he said, real casual, "You ever cross Astoria at night and see somebody standing on the pedestrian side? Soaked? Like they're waiting for you." I must have gone pale because he stopped mid-bite. He nodded slowly when I didn't answer. "Yeah," he said. "Thought so." Apparently, I'm not the only one who's seen someone climb that rail and vanish without a sound. No reports. No recovered bodies. Just the same story told by different voices, over coffee at 3 in the morning. I still cross the Astoria-Megler Bridge sometimes. Work is work. But I don't slow down anymore. I keep my eyes on the lane markers, hands locked on the wheel, and if I see a shape on that walkway, I pretend I didn't. Because whatever's standing out there in the mist, head tilted like it's trying to hear your engine, it doesn't need you to watch it jump. It just needs to know you're close enough to touch. And once you've seen that handprint on your door, you never quite shake the feeling that next time, it'll be on the inside. They tell stories about a lot of roads up here, canyon stretches, old logging routes, two-lane blacktop nobody should be on after midnight. But Highway 7 near Mount Rainier has one that drivers don't joke about. The rain-soaked hitchhiker. Name's Mark. I run nights out of Tacoma, mostly small outfit regional runs. I'm not long haul like some guys, but I've put enough miles on my rig to know when something's just road weirdness. And when it's not. That night I was hauling a half-load of bottled drinks south toward Morton. Nothing crazy. I'd done the route so many times I could trace it with my eyes closed. Highway 7 cuts along the foothills, dark woods on both sides, Mount Rainier somewhere out there in the black, hidden behind low clouds. It was just after 1 a.m. cold rain. The kind that doesn't fall straight down, just appears sideways in your headlights. Inside the cab it smelled like diesel and old dust. My coffee had gone lukewarm, a burned smell hanging in the air from the little machine I keep behind the seats. The heater was pushing that dry warmth at my legs, but the windows still sweated with condensation. My wipers squeaked with every pass, blades fighting to clear thick drops that seemed to replace themselves instantly. The CB was dead. No chatter, no local guys, no weather reports. Just a faint underlying hiss, the kind of noise you stop hearing after a while. I had the dash dimmed down low, just enough to see the gauges, RPM steady, temp in the green, fuel fine. The engine hummed beneath me, a constant vibration up through the floor and into the wheel. Out ahead, my headlights tunneled through the rain, catching reflective posts and yellow lines and not much else. Highway 7 at that hour feels like a road the rest of the world forgot about. No houses, no open businesses, just the soft rise of the shoulder into dark trees and the suggestion of mountains beyond. I'd heard the stories. Every PNW driver has. Hitchhiker on 7. They say at diners and fuel stops. Soaked to the bone. You pass him once, whatever. You pass him twice, you keep going. You pass him 3 times. You don't stop for anything. Most guys laugh when they tell it. Nerves hiding under jokes. I always figured it was somebody screwing with dash cams for likes. Friend dropping the guy off ahead, picking him up, leapfrogging trucks. You tell yourself that. Until you're out there alone at 1 in the morning with nothing but rain and trees and your own thoughts. I just passed a small turnout, just a gravel patch and a sagging scenic view sign. When I saw him, he was standing on the right side of the road, just beyond the white line, at the very edge of my high beams. Male from the outline, medium height, soaked. The rain hammered down around him, but he didn't flinch, didn't shiver. He stood perfectly still, arm raised, thumb not quite out, just lifted, like he'd forgotten the rest of the gesture halfway through. His head was tilted down, chin toward his chest. Long dark hair hung forward, matted and dripping, hiding his face completely. Whatever he was wearing, a coat maybe, was plastered tight to his body, water streaming off the hem. I eased a little toward the center of the lane, giving him space. Reflex. My first thought was, idiot. Someone dropped him in the wrong place. My second, why the hell isn't he moving? As I passed, my headlights washed over him fully. He didn't raise his head, didn't step back, just stood there, that same frozen posture, that same arm stuck halfway toward the road. The rain running off him was lit silver for a second, then swallowed by the dark as he slid out of my side window view. I checked my mirror. He wasn't there. No figure in the tail of my lights. No shape on the shoulder. Just rain and wet asphalt and the distorted gleam of my own trailer. Fine, I thought. Fog. Shadows. Tired eyes. I watched the clock. A habit. 1 minute passes quick when you're rolling, but I counted it off in my head. 45 seconds. 50. A minute 10. The road curved gently, then straightened. That's when I saw him again. Same side, same distance from the white line, same spot in my headlights, just at the edge before you can see someone's face clearly. Standing in the rain like nothing had changed. Same arm raised, same tilt of the head, same hair hiding everything from the nose up. My hands tightened on the wheel. There had been no turnouts, no driveways, no roads cutting off. Nothing he could have used to leapfrog me. And even if there had been, there's no way he could run like that in this weather, in those clothes, and still look that. Still, he wasn't breathing hard, wasn't bent over, just waiting. I passed him again. This time I watched him carefully as long as I dared, tracking him out of the corner of my eye. My high beams slid across him and off, and in that couple of seconds he didn't shift so much as an inch. My mirror showed me nothing, just empty shoulder fading into black. I felt my own breath pick up, fogging the lower edge of the windshield. The heater suddenly felt too warm, the air too thick. My mouth tasted like burned coffee and copper. You're tired, I told myself. Your brain's looping the image. Night driving. Happens. I reached over, flicked the radio on, just static between stations. I turned it off. Tried the CB. Any northbound on 7, you copy? My voice sounded strange in the cab, too loud in the small space. You seeing anybody walking out here in this mess? Static. Then a brief crackle like someone might answer, then nothing. I gripped the wheel again. The leather felt slick under my palms. Another minute crawled by. The road dipped, curved slightly, then straightened, same pattern as before. My headlights speared the darkness. There he was. Exact same spot in my beams. Same posture. Arm still raised like it had never dropped. Head still tilted down, listening for something only he could hear. That's when the logic finally broke. Humans move. They adjust their feet. They scratch their nose. They blink at bright lights. They don't reappear in the exact same place, same pose, 3 times in a row on a stretch of road with nowhere to come from and nowhere to go. I didn't slow down. I didn't speed up. I just drove past. As I went by, my passenger side window fogged in a strange pattern, circular, like breath hitting glass. The hairs on my arms stood up. The cab, already small, felt like it was shrinking. My mirror didn't show him, but for half a second I could have sworn I saw a second pair of headlights behind me, way back, too far for someone I hadn't noticed. Then they shimmered, stretched, and snapped into darkness. I rode that feeling all the way to the next rest area. Just a basic pull-off, a half-dozen truck slots, a dark visitor center, a lonely vending machine glowing through fogged glass. I parked under the one working light. Killed the engine. Silence poured in heavy. The ticking of hot metal cooling. The faint patter of rain on the roof. Somewhere a reefer unit buzzed to life in another rig, then settled into a low drone. I sat there for a minute, hands still on the wheel, watching the rain streak down the windshield in crooked lines. My dash cam's little red light blinked at me. Always recording. Always watching. The rational part of my brain finally found a foothold. If I'd imagined it, the camera would show empty road. If I hadn't, then I'd have proof it was someone's very sick joke. I pulled the SD card, slotted it into my old laptop on the passenger seat. Rain drummed on the roof while the folders loaded. Timestamps scrolled by until I found the segment. Highway 7. 1:16 a.m. I hit play. The cab audio was low, just engine hum and wiper squeaks. The view showed exactly what I'd seen with my own eyes. Wet road, white line, trees. And there he was, standing at the edge of the shoulder, just inside the right side of the frame. Soaked. Motionless. Arm raised. Only, on camera he was wrong. His outline flickered. Not like a digital glitch, but like he was there and not there 60 times a second. His edges bled into the rain, stretching, ballooning, collapsing back. When the wiper passed, the streak across the windshield cut through him, but the shape lagged a frame behind before catching up. I watched my truck slide past him, watched his figure leave the frame. I scrubbed ahead 1 minute. There he was again. Same position. Same flicker. Same impossible stillness. The third time, the dash cam did something I still can't explain. As my truck approached, the image warped. Not the whole screen, just him. His body widened, then stretched tall, then compressed into a thin vertical smudge before snapping back. The rain kept its pattern. The road didn't glitch. My headlights stayed clean. Only he changed. When my truck drew level with him, the footage jittered hard. One frame of him at the shoulder, next frame of him closer, like he'd taken a step toward the lane without moving. The audio crackled in that second. A sharp burst of static over the engine noise. Then he was gone. Frame to frame. There then not. My own breathing sounded too loud in the cab. Behind me, a truck door slammed somewhere in the lot. A dog barked once and quieted. The rest area lights hummed. I scrubbed back. Played the last approach again. Slower this time. That's when I noticed it. As my truck was about to pass him, his head finally moved. Just a little. The wet curtain of hair parted. Like something underneath it turned toward the cab. I caught a pale glimpse, too pale where a face should be. Not features, exactly. Just blank lightness. A wrong color in all that dark. And then, for 2 frames, the dash cam view stretched sideways like the lens itself had been pulled. In one of those stretched frames, my driver's side window showed a shape behind the glass that wasn't me. Too tall for the cab. Too thin. Leaning in. I slammed the laptop shut. The cab felt different. Heavier. The air thicker. Carrying the smell of damp fabric that wasn't mine. Wet wool. River water. Something earthy under it all. My driver's side window fogged in a perfect oval. Like someone had just leaned their face against the glass from outside. The fog bloomed out of nowhere, spreading in a soft ring. Without thinking, I hit the power and started the truck. The engine roared to life, vibration pushing up through the seat. The familiar hum grounded me. I shoved the laptop back into its case without looking at it and pulled out of the rest area. The rest of the run, I didn't stop. Didn't check the footage again. Didn't touch the dashcam card. I still run Highway 7 sometimes. Work doesn't care about stories. But I don't look at the shoulders much anymore. If I see something standing in the rain ahead, I keep my eyes on the center line and pretend I didn't. Guys still talk about the hitchhiker. Some say he's a ghost from a wreck. Some say he's a warning. Some say he tries to get in if you stop. I don't know what he is. All I know is the camera saw him glitch like bad static wearing a coat. And for 2 frames, he wasn't on the side of the road anymore. He was right next to me. And every time I crossed that stretch at midnight, with the wipers squeaking and the rain pounding and the trees crowding in, I can't shake the feeling that if I hit pause at just the right moment, I'd find him sitting in the passenger seat, finally showing me his face. I've been on the road long enough to know when I'm tired and when something is wrong. What happened outside Eugene that night wasn't fatigue. And it wasn't something any map or DOT report could explain. Name's Harris. 26 years hauling up and down I-5 mostly nights. I like the quiet, the steady hum, the feeling of being the only soul awake between two sleeping cities. But the quiet can turn on you if you're not careful. Can make you see things, hear things. And sometimes, it can show you something real that shouldn't exist. This happened on a long run from Portland down to Medford. Reefer was running heavy. Produce stacked tight, humid air chilling the whole trailer. The smell of cold veggies seeped into the cab every time I cracked the window. It was just past 3 a.m. The witching hour. Inside the cab. Heater pushing dry warmth at my legs, a stale coffee in the cup holder. Faint rattle in the dash I kept meaning to fix. A CB silent except for a soft hiss. Outside. Wet asphalt, yellow lines stretching into rain-drenched blackness. Headlights scattering off mist that drifted across the road like low fog. My hands were numb from gripping the wheel too long. Ice stinging. I needed a break. 5 minutes to stretch, splash water on my face, reset my brain before I drifted into that dangerous microsleep zone. That's when I saw it. A rest stop. Small. Older than the usual concrete blocks ODOT builds these days. Maybe 1960s era. Brick, weathered with a single yellow light flickering above the entrance. A lone vending machine buzzed under the awning. The sign overhead read Lane Creek Rest Area in peeling paint. I'd never seen it before, and I knew that stretch well. But exhaustion makes you doubt yourself, so I told myself it must have been one of those tiny state-funded stops everybody forgets about. I eased off onto the gravel shoulder and pulled the rig into the small lot. Maybe room for 3 trucks, tops. No other vehicles, no other lights. Just the building, dark trees behind it, and the soft electric hum of that vending machine. As soon as I opened the cab door, the smell hit me. Rain-soaked cedar, earth, and something old, like stepping into a basement that hadn't been opened in a decade. My boots sank slightly into damp gravel as I walked toward the building. The yellow light above the door flickered with a buzzing sound, casting jittering shadows that made the doorway breathe in and out with the rain. Inside it was quiet, too quiet. No running hand dryers, no plumbing noises, no echo of someone shifting in a stall. Just the smell of wet wood, like the building itself had soaked up years of storms. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, stared at myself in the spotted mirror. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, then steadied. My boots crunched faintly on the floor. The tiles were old brownish red, arranged in a neat square pattern. Mud from my boots filled the grooves in the exact grid beneath me. I dried my hands on my shirt, took a deep breath, and stepped back outside. The air was cold and damp. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. The vending machine hummed steadily. I could hear the distant sound of my reefer cycling. Everything normal. Everything fine. I walked down the short path that led back to the parking area. Took maybe 20 steps. Then stopped. My truck was there. But the rest stop wasn't. Where the brick building should have been. There was nothing. No walls. No doorway. No flickering yellow light. No vending machine. Not even pavement. Just grass. Tall, wet, blowing slightly in the breeze. A line of dark Douglas firs rising behind it like a wall. I stared hard, blinking rain from my eyes. The building hadn't collapsed. There was no rubble. The light hadn't just gone out. There was no wiring. The vending machine hadn't been moved. There were no tracks. It was like the entire structure had never existed. But my boots told a different story. I looked down. The mud on them, wet, dark, reddish, matched the tile pattern from inside the building. Perfect squares imprinted in the exact layout of that bathroom floor. I lifted one foot and saw a faint reddish smudge on the grass where I'd stepped. Not normal mud. Not soil. Something older. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. The cab lights from my truck reflected in the puddles nearby, the yellow glow trembling with each beat of my heart. I took a slow step backward, eyes locked on the place where the building should have been. The breeze carried the smell of wet grass up the hillside. Then something shifted in the trees. A slow rustling. Not wind. Too heavy. Too deliberate. I squinted, trying to see through the dark. Branches swayed out of sync with the wind. Something moved between them, far back, deeper than headlights could reach. A shape? A figure? Couldn't be sure. Rain distorts everything. Night does the rest. The rustling stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Not because of what you hear, but because of what you don't. I swallowed hard and backed toward the truck. My boots made soft, wet thuds on the gravel, real, familiar, grounding. When I reached the cab, I climbed in fast and slammed the door. The interior light flicked on, illuminating the empty passenger seat, the dashboard, the steering wheel. Safe, contained, normal. My hand trembled as I turned the key. The engine fired. The heater whooshed. My mirrors showed nothing but rain. I pulled back onto the highway, speeding more than I should have, heart hammering. 2 miles down the road, I saw a sign glow in my headlights. Rest area closed. No services, Lane Creek Rest Stop. Decommissioned 1998. My mouth went dry. I had just walked inside that building. I saw the vending machine, heard the lights, used the sink. If it was abandoned, why wasn't it still there? Buildings don't vanish. They decay. They crumble. They rot. They don't disappear into grass and trees. I drove until dawn without stopping once. Every time my eyes grew heavy, I thought of the tile pattern on my boots, the exact imprint of a floor that wasn't there. When I finally checked the tile mud later in daylight, there was no smell, no normal dirt texture. It flaked off like dried clay. And in the bottom grooves of my boot tread, almost invisible unless you tilted it under light, were tiny flecks of something glossy. Like old varnish. Old wood varnish. Like from a building that hadn't existed for 25 years. I asked around at the next depot. A couple older drivers went real quiet when I brought up Lane Creek. One finally said, "That stop burned down in '98. Electrical fire. Killed 2 travelers sleeping inside. Nothing left but foundation." "Was the building old brick?" I asked. He stared at me like I'd told him his childhood address. "Yes." "And the bathroom tile reddish? Square pattern?" He didn't answer. Didn't have to. I don't take breaks near Eugene anymore. Not at night. Not alone. And every time I drive past that stretch, the trees look thicker. Closer. Like something inside them is waiting for another exhausted driver to stop and walk into a building that isn't there anymore. Or maybe never left. You get used to seeing junk on the road in Yakima Valley. Fallen ladders, apple crates, loose tarp, irrigation pipe. You don't get used to seeing something organized. Name's Joel. I've been running Washington routes for 16 years, mostly agricultural. Apples, hops, cherries out of the valley, cold storage to distribution centers up and down I-82. If there's a back road between Yakima and the Tri-Cities, I've probably taken it at 3 in the morning in the rain. This was one of those nights. Late October. Harvest winding down. The air had that cold, dusty taste it gets after dark when the sun's finally stopped baking the orchards. I was empty, heading back toward Yakima from a drop near Sunnyside, bobtailing along a smaller 2-lane road that paralleled the freeway. Inside the cab it smelled like stale coffee, diesel, and old cardboard. The heater was on low, warm air pushing at my boots. A faint rattle in the overhead compartment tapped out a rhythm with every crack I rolled over. My headlights carved a tunnel of pale yellow through the darkness, catching fence posts, orchard rows, the occasional mailbox. The CB was quiet. No one out here but me and the odd pickup running home from a late shift. The hum of my engine and the vibration through the seat were steady, almost hypnotic. You know that point in a night run where your eyes start to sting and your brain feels half a second behind everything? I was just reaching that point when I saw the screws. They flashed under my headlights all at once. A glittering line across the asphalt like someone had spilled jewelry. I hit the brakes. Not hard, just enough to bleed speed before I rolled right over them. The truck slowed, engine brake growling a low protest. The empty frame had more bounce than I liked. I eased it to a stop with my right tires hugging the shoulder. The road went quiet. Just the ticking of hot metal and the distant thrum of I-82 somewhere out there in the dark. I flipped on my four-ways, grabbed a flashlight from the passenger footwell, and stepped out into the valley night. The air hit me with that mix of damp earth and diesel from the main highway. Crickets chirped somewhere in the weeds. A faint smell of manure drifted from a nearby field. Overhead, the sky was empty black. No moon, just a few dim stars peeking between thin clouds. My boots crunched gravel as I walked around to the front of the truck and let the headlights wash over the road. The screws were exactly what I thought I'd seen. A line. Perfect. Dead straight across the lane. Not spilled. Placed. Hundreds of them, maybe. Shiny. Sharp. All pointed in different directions but spaced evenly, covering nearly the whole width of the asphalt from centerline to shoulder. Different sizes too, with screws, sheet metal screws, a few bolts mixed in for good measure. I've seen screws scattered before. Contractor leaves a box open in the bed, hits a bump, now the highway has teeth. But they don't land in a line like that. They bounce. They clump. They don't form a neat barrier. Someone had done this on purpose. I swept the flashlight beam along the ditch, across the orchard edge. No parked vehicle. No open toolbox. No kid crouched behind a tree laughing at his own prank. Just shadows between the rows, branches like black ribs against the night. I muttered under my breath and went to work. Last thing I needed was some sedan hitting this and blowing all four tires, or worse, another rig catching them and losing control. I crouched and started scooping screws into my gloved hand. They were cold and gritty with a film of dust, some a little rusty, some bright like they were new out of the box. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly as I moved, making the little metal pieces glitter. I had a good handful when I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me. Slow. Deliberate. Crunching on gravel. I froze, one knee on the asphalt, one boot on the shoulder. The hairs on the back of my neck went up. The sound came again, 2, maybe 3 steps, like someone walking up along the side of my trailer. "You need something?" I called over my shoulder, trying to keep my voice level. No answer. No movement. Just the low idle of a reefer from somewhere far off on the highway. The chirp of crickets. The distant hiss of a passing semi. I turned fast, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. No one there. Just my truck. Four-ways ticking amber. Exhaust pipe ghosting white in the cold. Beyond it, orchards, wire fencing, the faint outline of a barn way off in the distance. I swept the light around again. The gravel shoulder was undisturbed. No fresh prints between my boot tracks. No shadow ducking out of sight. My pulse thudded a little harder. I took a breath, chalked it up to tired nerves and the echo of my own steps bouncing off the side of the trailer a second late. When I turned back to the road, my hand opened automatically to drop the screws into a small pile near the shoulder. Nothing fell. My palm was empty. I stared at my glove. I had felt them a second ago. The weight of them, the edges biting into the leather. My fingers had been curled tight around a full handful of cold metal. Now nothing. Just the slight imprint where I'd been gripping something. I looked down at the asphalt. The line of screws was intact. Unbroken. No cleared patch where I'd been working. No messy pile where I meant to deposit them. It was like I had never touched them. Cold crept up from my boots, an inside-out chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I knew what I'd done. I could feel the phantom impressions of each piece against my skin, like the way your hands remember carrying something even after you set it down. But the road in front of me said otherwise. I knelt again, slower this time, my knees popping. I picked up just one screw, a longwood screw, threads full of grit. I turned it between my fingers, the beam of the flashlight catching the spiral. Solid. Real. I stood, keeping my eyes on it, and walked carefully back toward my truck. Each step felt louder than it should have, echoing against the empty road. When I reached the shoulder, I opened my hand over the gravel. My palm was empty. The screw was gone. No clink as it hit rock. No drop. Just absence. The skin of my hand tingled, like I'd held onto an electrical wire for a split second too long. Behind me, directly where I'd been standing a moment ago, something moved. Not sound this time, pressure. The air changed. The way it does when a vehicle passes too close on the other side of a barrier, or when someone steps into your space behind you. The back of my jacket fluttered, barely, like air had been displaced in a rush where nothing was. I spun around with the flashlight. The screws in the lane shifted, not all at once, little patches at a time, like small sections of the line had shuddered and hopped, then settled back. I watched as a few of them edged closer together, forming tight little clusters, then slowly straightened back into a perfect row. I backed up until my shoulders hit the side of the truck. The cold metal grounded me, but also made the hairs on my arms stand even higher. The night felt thicker, heavier. The smell of dust and distant manure faded under a metallic tang, like hot steel cooling on a workbench. In the corner of my vision, it looked like the headlights dimmed for a heartbeat, then brightened again. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the screws began to roll. They didn't roll downhill or toward a ditch. They rolled toward the center of the lane, away from the shoulder, converging on a single invisible line. Not fast, not dramatic, just a quiet, purposeful shift, metal whispering against asphalt. Within seconds, that messy line became something else. Pattern. At first I thought it was random clusters, gaps, but the longer I stared, the more my brain tried to make sense of it. It looked almost like letters, curved, jagged, a word written by someone who didn't quite remember how to shape it. My flashlight beam flickered once, twice, then steadied. The screws stopped moving. Whatever they spelled, my mind refused to lock onto it. Like trying to read a word in a language you almost know but haven't used in years. My chest felt tight. My ears rang with the distant rush of freeway traffic. Every instinct I had told me to get back in the cab. Now, I didn't argue. I eased along the side of the truck, one hand trailing the cold metal, keeping my eyes on the road until the last possible second. Just before my cab blocked the view, I saw the line of screws twitch again, bowing inward like they were forming a curve. Then the hood cut off the sight. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it without thinking. The cab warmth wrapped around me, stale, diesel-scented, safe. My own reflection stared back from the dark windshield for a second before the headlights claimed it back. I put the truck in gear, checked my mirrors, a habit that suddenly felt like an invitation to see something I didn't want to see, and pulled out. I expected to feel the crunch under my tires, the pop of punctured rubber. Something. Instead, the ride was smooth, too smooth. In the side mirror, for a split second, I saw the screws scatter like dry leaves blown across the asphalt. Away from my wheels, away from the lane, like they were making way. I didn't stop again until I hit a lit truck stop on the edge of Yakima. When I climbed down and checked my tires, every tread was clean. No metal, no scuffs, but wedged in the groove of my left boot heel was a single screw. Long threaded, head flattened, like it had been run over by something heavy. The threads weren't dusty. They were dark, stained with something that looked too much like old, dried blood. I scraped it out and dropped it into the trash by the fuel pump. It didn't make a sound when it hit the plastic liner. I asked one of the older guys later if he'd ever seen screws laid out in a line out toward Yakima. His face went tight. "Yeah," he said. "Couple times. Always in the same stretch. Heard it's where a contractor went under a trailer years back. Load spilled. Screws everywhere. They never found all of him." He stirred his coffee, staring at the table. "Some nights, it's like the road's still trying to finish the job. I don't take that back route much anymore. I stick to the main lanes, where the debris is random and the danger makes sense. But on the rare nights I end up out there again, and my headlights catch the glitter of metal up ahead, I don't stop to be a good Samaritan. Because whatever is setting those screws down, one by one, isn't interested in a flat tire. It's waiting for somebody tired enough, curious enough, to bend down and pick something up, and not notice when the footsteps start behind them. Most truckers will tell you the same thing. The CB isn't just for communication. Sometimes it picks up things it shouldn't. Name's Rourke. I run nights between Olympia and Portland, short haul, mostly industrial freight. I prefer the late hours. Fewer cars, fewer distractions, just the hum of the engine and the white lines sliding by like a slow heartbeat. This happened on a foggy winter run on I-5, somewhere south of Olympia but north of Longview. That exact stretch, half forest, half swamp, has always felt wrong to me. Trees lean too close. Fog rises off the wetlands like steam from a wound. It's quiet in a way that doesn't feel natural. That night, the fog was thick enough to look alive. Headlights carved out only 15, 20 yards ahead. The cab was warm from the heater, windows sweating faintly from my breath. The smell inside was all diesel and stale coffee, the usual. I had the CB off. No need for chatter that late. Just me, the hum of the engine, and a thermos cooling beside me. I was halfway between exits when the CB crackled on by itself. Not a soft pop, not background hiss. A hard, sharp burst of static, like someone had keyed up right inside the cab. The radio dial glowed orange, shifting channels on its own. One click, another, then it stopped on a channel I never used. No trucker uses it. Channel 27.4. There is no .4 on a CB. I stared at it for a second, confused. Maybe the unit glitched. Maybe moisture got inside. Maybe a whisper filtered through the speaker. Breathy. Close. Too close. Don't look in your mirrors. Every muscle in my chest tightened. Truckers mess around on the radio, sure. Ghost stories, pranks, coded jokes. But this voice, it didn't sound like it was coming from a speaker. It sounded like it was coming from behind my seat. The cab air changed warmer, then colder in a single breath. A faint smell of damp metal drifted behind me, like rust after rain. I swallowed hard and gripped the wheel. "Who is this?" I said, keeping my voice steady. Static answered, soft at first, then layered, like multiple voices whispering at different depths. Then the whisper came again. "Don't look behind you." I didn't move, didn't breathe. The cab suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer, like the darkness behind the seat was thick enough to touch. I forced myself to focus on the road. Fog, white line, guardrail disappearing into mist. I wasn't going to play along with some CB trick from a bored kid in a nearby pickup. "You're full of crap," I muttered. "Radio interference. That's all." Silence. Then, softly, as if someone leaned their mouth right next to the mic. "Do not look in your mirrors." Something in the tone shifted. Less warning. More pleading. My pulse thudded in my throat. My palms went slick on the wheel. I reached for the CB to switch it off. Before my fingers touched it, the radio screamed. Not voices. Not static. The sound of metal bending loud, sharp. A tearing shriek that filled the cab. My vision blurred at the edges. Instinct yanked my hands back to the wheel. I kept my eyes straight, but something flickered in the left mirror. Dark, too close, too fast. My breath stuttered. The radio hissed, crackled, then whispered again. "Stay forward. Stay forward. Stay." The voice cut out with a sound like gurgling. Couldn't help it. I looked. Just a quick glance at the convex mirror on the driver's side. No more than half a heartbeat. A truck was right behind me, right up against my trailer. So close its headlights should have swallowed me whole. Old rig, square nose, rust along the hood seams. No logo, no plates. It didn't belong on that road. Didn't belong anywhere. And yet, as soon as I looked, it blinked out. Gone. No fade. No swerve. No skid. Just gone. The road behind me was empty for a half-mile. Fog rolling across black asphalt like silent waves. I jerked my eyes forward again, heart pounding. The CB clicked back on. Too late. The whisper wasn't from the CB this time. Came from the passenger seat. The cold hit me first. A breath of air colder than the cab, colder than the fog, colder than the winter night outside. It brushed the back of my neck like fingers. I didn't look. Couldn't. My hands tightened on the wheel until my knuckles burned. Then something brushed the door behind my left shoulder. Soft, slow, testing. A A sound followed, metal tapping metal, like long nails touching the outside skin of the cab. One tap. Two. A dragging scrape. The road curved slightly. I stayed steady, eyes locked on the fog in front of me, refusing to check the mirrors. The tapping moved. Down the door. Across the sleeper window. Then along the back wall behind me. Like something circling my cab on the outside, dragging its fingers along the metal. The whisper came again, from every direction at once. Don't look, don't look, don't. The radio cut out. The lights on the CB died. The cab fell into total silence except for the engine. Then, in the passenger mirror just at the edge of my vision, a shape leaned close. Tall, thin, too tall for the cab of any truck. Its outline flickered in the fog like heat haze. I kept my eyes forward. My heart hammered so hard I could barely hear anything else. My breath fogged the windshield, warm inside, cold outside. The heater fought to stay ahead of the icy pressure creeping into the cab. The shape in the mirror didn't move, didn't fade. It just waited. Then the road widened. Rest area ahead. Lights bleeding weakly through fog. I pulled off hard, tires skidding a little on the wet pavement. The moment my truck crossed under the rest area lights, the pressure behind me broke. The cold vanished. The tapping stopped. Whatever hovered by the mirrors lifted away. The CB flickered back to life, but the screen was blank. Channel gone. Not even static. I parked under a light and finally forced myself to check both mirrors fully. Nothing. Just the empty lot and fog drifting slow across the concrete. But on the side of my trailer, about 7 feet up, something had scraped the metal. 5 drag marks, long perfectly parallel, like the tips of fingers made of steel. I told myself it was vandals, or a low tree branch, or road debris, anything but what I knew. The next day, a mechanic at the yard pointed at the scratches and said, "Hell of a height for damage, isn't it?" Whatever hit that trailer wasn't on the ground. I didn't correct him. Now, every time my CB crackles with static in the middle of the night, every time a dead channel lights up on its own, every time I catch the hint of movement in my mirrors, I remember the whisper, "Don't look," and the second whisper that followed, "Too late." Because once you've seen something that close behind your trailer, something that was never there, the mirrors stop being helpful. They become doors. The shadow at Cougar Mountain. Cougar Mountain's one of those places that always looks damp, even in summer. Too many trees, too much moss. The light never quite reaches the ground. You take enough back roads around there at night, you start to understand why locals don't like driving after dark. Name's Tyler. I've been running local and regional out of Kent for about 15 years. Mostly lumber, construction materials, sometimes equipment. Nights are common. Contractors like their stuff ready by dawn, and traffic's easier when the rest of the world's asleep. This run was supposed to be easy. Short hop. Small flatbed with a partial load of framing lumber going to a site above Issaquah, near Cougar Mountain. Nothing oversized, nothing crazy. Just the kind of job you take without thinking twice because you've done 100 like it. It was just past midnight when I left the yard. Rain had been steady all evening. Not a storm, just that PNW drizzle that never really stops. The kind that makes the asphalt shine black and oily, like spilled ink. Inside the cab, it smelled like damp canvas, diesel, and the last guy's fast food. The heater was ticking along on low, pushing a thin line of warmth at my boots. My thermos sat in the cup holder, coffee gone lukewarm but still drinkable. The dash lights glowed a soft orange, gauges in their usual places. Radio was off. CB was on, but turned down to a low hiss, just enough that I'd hear if someone actually called out. Most don't out there. Those roads are narrow, twisting, and not many trucks run them at night. The farther I got from the freeway, the darker it became. Street lights thinned, then disappeared altogether. Houses turned into silhouettes behind towering firs. The road climbed and curled, following the hillside with lazy, dangerous confidence. My headlights stretched out over wet pavement, catching the white edge line and the broken center stripe, then nothing but black. Cougar Mountain sits in that weird pocket where suburb and forest overlap. One minute you're passing cul-de-sacs and glowing windows. Next it's just trees pressing in on both sides and the feeling that you're too high up and too far from everything. Those roads have always felt haunted, but that night the shadows felt heavier. The rain made everything shine. My beams hit the wet branches and turned them into slick, moving shapes. The ditches on either side of the road were full of black water. Reflectors along the shoulder flashed in and out of sight like eyes. I rolled my shoulders, trying to work out the stiffness. I wasn't tired yet, but there was a weight in the air that made me feel like I should be. The first odd thing I noticed was the way my headlights behaved. They seemed shorter. On an empty road in the dark, you get used to the way your high beams throw a certain distance. After a while, you can feel how far they reach without thinking about it. But tonight, they stopped sooner. Like the dark ahead wasn't just absence of light, but something solid they were pushing against. I flicked them off and back on, just to be sure they weren't dimming. They looked normal in the reflection off the wet road close to the truck. Radios were fine. Voltage was steady. Everything checked out. Still, the dark ahead swallowed the beams faster than it should have. I pushed on, speed dropping a few miles an hour without me deciding. The engine hummed under my feet, the vibration familiar and steady. Wipers beat a slow rhythm, squeaking slightly at the end of each swipe. Around one tight bend, the forest opened briefly to my right and offered a glimpse of the valley below, just scattered pockets of light through mist. It should have felt reassuring. Instead, it just made the road I was on feel more exposed, like a ledge. I came around another curve and saw it. At first, it was just a darker patch in the road ahead. You see that a lot: fallen branch, rock, maybe an animal. But as the truck rolled closer, the shape sharpened in that jerky, wet way things do under moving headlights. A figure, kneeling in the center of the lane. I eased off the accelerator, foot hovering over the brake. You don't slam on the brakes on a wet mountain road unless you want to meet the ditch face first. The figure didn't move, just stayed there, like it was praying or searching for something on the asphalt. My high beams caught it full on. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was long. Too long. A dark shape stretched across the asphalt, like a shadow spilled from something taller than any man. Its edges weren't crisp. They blurred slightly like heat shimmer, except the night was cold and getting colder by the second. Kneeling, it reached almost halfway across the lane. A smear of darkness, thicker than everything around it. I downshifted gently, the engine brake growling low. The truck slowed. As I closed the distance, the thing in the road began to rise. Slowly, smoothly, no shifting of weight, no bracing of hands or knees. It just unfolded upwards, like smoke reversing direction. Taller than a man, then taller than the cab, then taller than even that, until the top of it vanished into the black above my headlights. Its width stayed the same, about as wide as the center of my lane. But its height, it was wrong. Felt wrong in my eyes. Like perspective had been thrown off, like I was looking at something too close through a lens meant for distance. The head turned toward me. There was no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a hollow, a deeper, blacker absence where features should have been. As if someone had taken the night itself and cut a hole out of it, darker than darkness, and pinned it where a face belonged. My chest tightened. I felt my tongue go dry. I should have stopped. Every safety rule in my bones said I should. But stopping meant staying in front of it longer. Stopping meant inviting whatever this was to get closer. So I did what experience and panic decided together. I kept rolling, slower, but moving. The shadow thing stood dead center, towering over the road. My headlights hit it and didn't bounce. The light poured into it and vanished. The road behind it was completely black, like someone had erased a section of reality and penciled this thing in its place. As the front bumper crossed that invisible threshold, the engine sputtered. Not a casual hiccup, a violent stutter. The RPMs dropped hard. The wheel went heavy. The lights dimmed for a fraction of a second. Every gauge seemed to flicker. The temperature in the cab plunged. One breath I was fine. The next, I exhaled a cloud of fog like I just stepped into a freezer. My cheeks prickled. Sweat on the back of my neck turned into a cold slick. My breath fogged inside the cab. I could feel each inhale scraping cold air along my throat. The heater didn't shut off, I could hear it. But the air coming out of the vents was no longer warm. It was neutral, then cold. As the nose of the truck began overlapping the thing in the lane, the world narrowed. Everything outside the windshield vanished behind that deeper black. No trees, no road, no rain. Just a wall of impossible shadow swallowing the forward view. For a heartbeat, I had the sensation that the truck wasn't moving at all. That the wheels had left the road and were spinning in midair while something enormous watched from inches away. The head of the thing leaned down as my cab reached it. I didn't see it move. I just knew it had. That faceless hollow lowered toward the windshield, like it was peering in. Like it was checking me specifically. The sound inside the cab changed. No more rain patter. No more wiper squeak. No more hum of tires on wet road. Just the low thrum of the engine fighting to stay alive, and something else behind it. A faint, almost inaudible noise. Not a voice. Not a word. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Drawn out. But wrong, too low, too hollow. Like air being pulled through a cavern instead of lungs. It felt like it was inside my chest instead of my ears, vibrating my ribs from the inside out. My hands locked on the wheel. Knuckles burned white. I didn't blink. Couldn't. The truck kept rolling. 5 seconds. 10. Gradually, the black wall outside the windshield broke. The road faded back into view. Wet lines. Glimpses of trees. The world reassembled itself piece by piece. My engine coughed hard one last time and then settled, RPMs climbing back into their normal range. The lights brightened. The heater suddenly remembered it was supposed to be working and shoved warm air back into the cab. Behind me, in the mirrors, there was nothing. No towering shadow. No kneeling figure. No sign of anything at all. Just an empty slick of road stretching back into rain and hairpin turns. I didn't trust it. I didn't look long. I made the delivery. I put on my best everything is fine face for the 2 half-asleep guys at the site who signed my papers. I drove back down into the valley with my shoulders so tight they felt welded to my ears. At the yard, parked under sodium lights buzzing in the drizzle, I finally stepped out to walk around the truck. I told myself I was checking the tires, the lights, the load straps like any good driver. What I was really checking for was proof that something had been there. First, I found nothing. Everything looked normal. Mud splatter in the wheel wells. Road grime on the bumper. Rain streaks on the windshield. My reflection looked paler than usual, but that was it. Then I walked around the back. In the center of the trailer's rear door, maybe 5.5 feet up, the road grime was disturbed. Not wiped. Not smeared by a hand. Stretched. 5 long streaks, darker than the surrounding dirt, like something had dragged the grime downward in perfect lines. Not claws. Not exactly. Just elongated, parallel trails, each one the width of a finger, but too long. They stopped halfway down the door, as if whatever made them had pulled away. My breath ghosted in front of me, even though the air at the yard wasn't that cold. I stared at those lines for a long time. The next day, in the break room, I mentioned the roads around Cougar Mountain. One of the older drivers glanced up at me, eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You see something up there?" he asked. "Just shadows," I said. He gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, that's what everyone says. First time." I didn't ask him what he'd seen. He didn't ask me what I meant. We both knew. I still run loads near Cougar Mountain. Routes are routes, and freight doesn't care about ghosts. But I don't run that same back road at night anymore if I can help it. And on the nights I can't avoid it, when the rain makes the asphalt shine black and the trees lean in and the shadows feel heavier than they should, I keep my speed steady, my eyes forward, and my hands loose on the wheel. Because up there, in those winding curves, there's something that stands up out of the road like it's made of the night itself. And if it ever decides to step fully across the lane instead of letting you pass, I don't think the engine sputtering will be the only thing that stops. I've been hauling up near the Canadian border for over 20 years. That stretch between Bellingham and the crossing, dark pines, long isolation, fog that clings low to the asphalt, has a way of getting under your skin. Most drivers keep their radios low and their eyes forward on those runs. Things feel different up there. Name's Carter. Flatbed driver, mostly steel and equipment, sometimes lumber if the mills are backed up. I've driven enough night miles to know the difference between fatigue and something real. This happened around 2:30 in the morning on Highway 539, just north of Linden. Border less than an hour ahead. I had a half-load of steel plates strapped tight, heavy enough that I felt every slope and curve in my spine. The night was quiet except for the hum of my engine, and the faint whistle of cold air squeezing through the vent seam near my door. The cab smelled like spilled coffee, old paper logs, and the lingering scent of diesel on my jacket. Fog hung low over the road, thick enough to soften the headlights and make the trees on either side look like tall, black teeth. My wipers squeaked on every pass. Annoying, rhythmic, keeping me awake. Then I saw them. 3 trucks. In the distance, materializing out of the fog like they'd been waiting for someone to notice them. Black, unmarked, boxy shape, old-style military rigs or heavy government haulers, maybe. No logos, no reflectors, and most important, no plates. They were running in perfect formation. Perfect, evenly spaced, same speed, same lane position, not weaving, not adjusting. They moved like a single unit with 3 bodies. I slowed slightly, letting my headlights close the gap. I wanted to see the rear lights. Maybe it was a subcontractor hauling for the border station. But the back of the last truck had only 2 round red running lights. No brake lights, no turn signals. Not illegal exactly, old rigs get grandfathered in, but strange. The CB was quiet except for the soft hiss of static. No chat about the road. No callouts. Just silence. I tucked in behind them at a safe distance. 30, maybe 40 yards. Enough to study them. Their engines didn't sound right. I should have heard the low diesel rumble, heavy, bone-deep, the kind that vibrates the wheel. Instead, there was only the faintest hum. Too smooth for diesel. Too quiet for a convoy that size. My headlights washed over the back of the nearest rig. Black paint, matte, almost absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. I checked the GPS Highway 539, straight ahead for another 7 miles. A gas station at the junction. Nothing else. The convoy stayed dead center in the lane, speed unwavering, 52 miles per hour. Not 50. Not 55. Exactly 52. My fingers tightened on the wheel. Something about it felt rehearsed. At the 30-minute mark, I tried the CB. Northbound convoy ahead. You got a copy? Static. Black triples running near the border. Anyone hearing me? Silence. Then a faint crackle. Then nothing. I let it go. CB dead zones are common up there between the hills. But the 3 trucks, they never wavered. 40 minutes in, something changed. The lead truck flicked its right turn signal. Except there was no light, no actual signal. Just the faint mechanical click of my own truck registering a nearby turn indication through interference. The convoy drifted right. Slow. Precise. Their wheels lined up perfectly as they shifted toward a narrow break in the tree line. A place where no exit existed. Not on my GPS. Not on the map. Not in reality. Just trees. A shallow drainage ditch. Dense dark beyond. And yet, the convoy turned. All 3 trucks rolled off the highway, slipping between the trees like the forest had parted just for them. Their black silhouettes vanished into the timber, swallowed whole by cedar and shadow. No brake lights, no sway, no hesitation. 1 second they were on the asphalt, the next gone. I braked hard. Not enough to jackknife with the steel load, but enough that the straps creaked and the flatbed groaned. My headlights lit the place where they'd entered. Just trees. No tire tracks. No disturbed branches. No break in the ditch. Nothing. I killed my engine and stepped out into the freezing air. The sound hit me immediately. Silence so complete it felt like a pressure. The kind of stillness that makes your breath seem too loud. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked to the shoulder. My flashlight beam cut through the fog, catching wet grass and uneven ground. I expected to see tire impressions in the mud. but the ground was untouched. No ruts, no prints, no flattened grass. I swept the beam left and right. The tree line stood solid, thick with cedar trunks and underbrush. No path, no gap, no sign of movement. But I heard something. Low, distant. Engines. 3 of them, idling deep in the forest. My breath frosted in front of me as I turned my head, listening hard. The sound was unmistakable. Trucks idling heavy, steady, like engines warming in cold weather. But too far, too deep. No vehicle that size could have gotten through the trees without tearing half the forest down. The idling deepened, engines sinking like a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. Then the closest one revved, high and sharp, before dropping back to idle. I felt the vibration in my chest more than in my ears. I took one step forward into the ditch. The forest exhaled. Not wind, not branches shifting. Felt intentional, like something beyond the trees was pushing air outward, warning me back. The idling stopped, all at once, like a switch flipped. No sound, no breath of air, no engines, just dead silence. A silence so total it felt wrong. The fog thickened suddenly, rolling through the trees like smoke. My flashlight beam bounced off it, scattering light in a million directions. I backed up toward my truck, careful not to slip on the grass. When I reached the door and grabbed the handle, a sound broke the quiet. A long, slow horn blast. Not from behind me, not from the road, from the woods. A horn that belonged to a truck the size of the ones I'd followed. It echoed through the trees, low and steady, vibrating the ground under my boots. Then another, farther left. Then another deeper in. 3 horns, each one coming from a place no road reached. I climbed into my cab fast, slammed the door, and locked it out of instinct. My breath fogged the windshield. My hands shook on the wheel. I fired up the engine. The heater whirred. The cab lights flickered twice. As I pulled back onto the highway, a heavy pressure settled in the back of my skull, a feeling like I was being watched from the trees. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to check my mirrors. 5 miles later, the road leveled out and a way station sign appeared through the fog. I forced myself to breathe normally, but just before the station, my CB crackled once. A faint whisper, not static, not radio interference. A voice, still behind, still behind. I shut the CB off and didn't turn it on again until I crossed back into Washington 2 days later. I reported nothing to dispatch, nothing to DOT, nothing to anyone. Who'd believe it? But that exit, the one the convoy turned into, I drive that stretch often. There's nothing there. No break in the trees. No ditch disturbed. Nothing. And yet every time I pass that spot at night, I hear something in the distance. Engines. 3 of them, idling just out of sight. Waiting.